Millionaire CEO forced into a contract marriage to save his empire, but she became his only salvation. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The storm outside the Hale Tower was relentless, rain streaking across the glass walls like cold silver veins. Inside, under the pale glow of the boardroom lights, Adrian Hale, the 34-year-old CEO of Skyver Group, sat motionless at the head of the table. In front of him lay two documents. One was a merger contract worth billions, and the other was a marriage contract. His assistant's voice trembled. "Sir, the board has given you a deadline. If you are not married before the shareholders vote on Friday, they will transfer control to Mr. Lang." Adrian's jaw tightened. So this is how they corner me. His eyes, sharp and weary, flicked to the unsigned marriage papers. A contract marriage. It was absurd, but it was the only way to save the company his late father built from ruin. The elevator chimed, and a young woman stepped in. Lena Brooks, the company's junior accountant. Her blazer was still damp from the rain, and her worn shoes squeaked faintly on the marble floor. She looked confused to see him still there at midnight. "Mr. Hale?" she asked softly. "I thought everyone had gone home." Adrian studied her quietly. Weeks ago, she had exposed a fraudulent deal that nearly cost Skyver millions. Because of that, she had been labeled a troublemaker, almost fired, yet she had done it out of principle. That stubborn integrity, rare in his world, was the very thing he needed now. "Miss Brooks," he said, standing. His tone was low, precise. "You once said you would do anything to protect what you believe is right. Does that still stand?" Lena hesitated, wary. "Yes, I suppose it does." "Why?" He slid the folder across the table. "Because I need you to marry me." The silence was thunderous. The rain hammered harder against the glass, as if demanding an explanation. Her lips parted in disbelief. "Excuse me? This is not a joke," Adrian said evenly. "It is a legal arrangement. 6 months. You will be compensated, and all of your mother's medical debts will be cleared immediately." Lena stared at the contract as if it might burn her fingers. "You are asking me to marry you to save your company?" Litter watching and a longer Gatter's hands. "I am asking you to sign a business agreement that will protect thousands of employees," he replied, his voice clipped, almost defensive. "You have a spotless record. The media will believe it. In exchange, you will never have to worry about money again." Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. She wanted to laugh, to walk away, to tell him he was insane, but she saw the fatigue behind his cold expression, the exhaustion of a man carrying an empire alone. "What happens after 6 months?" she asked quietly. "The marriage will be dissolved," he said, cleanly. "No attachments, no emotions." "No emotions," she repeated bitterly. "That part seems easy for you." For a moment his mask cracked. Something flickered in his eyes, loneliness, maybe even regret, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. He extended a pen toward her. "Think of it as a contract, Miss Brooks. Nothing more." She looked at the pen, then at him. "You do not even know me." "I know enough," he said, voice softening for the first time. "You are honest. You keep your word. And right now, I need someone I can trust more than I need love." Outside, lightning flashed across the skyline. Lena glanced at the window, her reflection trembling beside his in the glass. Two strangers bound by desperation, standing on opposite sides of power. When she finally reached for the pen, her hand shook. "All right, Mr. Hale. Let us save your empire." Adrian's fingers brushed hers as she signed the final page. The ink bled slowly into the paper, sealing not just a contract, but the beginning of something neither of them was ready to name. The next morning, the rain had cleared, leaving the city wrapped in a gray stillness. Lena Brooks stood outside the grand courthouse downtown, clutching a small bouquet of white lilies that the secretary had handed her only minutes earlier. She barely understood how her life had turned upside down overnight. Yesterday, she was a junior accountant trying to pay off her mother's hospital bills. Today, she was about to marry her billionaire boss. Inside, the ceremony was quiet, almost clinical. The judge read through the paperwork with mechanical precision. There were no family members, no music, no warmth, just a notary, two witnesses from Skyver Group, and Adrian Hale, immaculate in a charcoal suit, his expression unreadable. Do you, Adrian Hale, take Lena Brooks to be your lawfully wedded wife for the term agreed upon in this contract? The judge asked. I do, he said, without a pause. Lena's throat tightened. I do. The pen felt heavy in her hand as she signed the marriage certificate. Adrian added his signature beside hers, swift and clean. When the papers were stamped, the judge smiled politely. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Hale. For a moment the words felt unreal, like someone else's life. As they stepped out into the crisp air, Adrian's driver opened the door of a sleek, black Bentley. From today, you will stay at my estate, Adrian said quietly, helping her in. The staff will handle everything you need. There are certain expectations you must follow. Expectations? She echoed. He met her eyes. We attend 5 public events together over the next 3 months. We do not share a bedroom, and you do not speak to the press. Ever. In public, we act as a real couple. In private, we remain professionals. Understood? Lena nodded stiffly. Understood. Vida said, in the Sigtarling the Depper said. The ride through the city was silent except for the hum of the engine. She looked out the window at the glass towers flashing by, her reflection pale and lost. The car turned off the main avenue and into the gated drive of Hale Manor, a vast, modern mansion that stretched across the hillside like a sculpture of stone and glass. When the doors opened, she was greeted by a line of staff. Welcome home, Mrs. Hale, the housekeeper said politely. Home. The word sounded wrong. That evening, dinner was served in a dining hall large enough for 50 guests. Adrian sat at one end of the table, Lena at the other. Between them, a sea of silver cutlery and candlelight. The silence was almost theatrical. You can speak freely, he said, noticing her discomfort. You look like you are about to run. She forced a small laugh. I just never imagined my first dinner as a married woman would feel like a business meeting. He lifted his glass slightly. It is exactly that. A partnership. Nothing more. Stave and the manager. She met his gaze. You keep saying that, as if you are trying to convince yourself. For the first time, something cracked in his composure. He lowered the glass, eyes dark with memory. I learned a long time ago that love complicates everything. I do not have space for it. Lena said nothing. The faint sound of rain returned outside, soft against the glass. She picked up her fork and looked at the man across the table, the one the world called ruthless, brilliant, untouchable. Yet in the flickering candlelight, he looked like someone who had forgotten how to be human. When dinner ended, a maid led her to a separate bedroom on the second floor. The room was stunning cream walls, silk curtains, a balcony overlooking the city lights. On the bedside table lay a thick envelope labeled Confidential, Mrs. Hale. Inside were documents listing her obligations, public appearances, and a credit card under her new name. Lena exhaled slowly. She should have felt victorious. Her debts were gone. Her mother's treatment would continue. But as she looked at the silent city beyond the glass, one truth settled heavy in her chest. She might have saved her mother, but she had sold her freedom. Downstairs, in his private study, Adrian stared at the same city skyline. On the corner of his desk lay their marriage certificate, still smelling faintly of ink. His fingers hovered over her name, Lena Brooks Hale. For the first time in years, he wondered if he had made the biggest mistake of his life. The next few days passed like a blur of rules and rehearsals. Every morning, Lena Hale woke to the quiet rhythm of a household that did not quite feel alive. The maids moved like ghosts, polite but distant. Her wardrobe had been replaced overnight, rows of designer dresses, tailored coats, and heels that pinched her feet when she tried to walk naturally. On the third day, she found herself standing in front of a large mirror as Clara, the stylist hired by Adrian, adjusted the collar of her gown. You must learn to carry yourself with confidence, Mrs. Hale, Clara said with a gentle smile. You are representing one of the most powerful families in the city now. Lena caught her reflection, same brown eyes, same nervous smile, but draped in silk and diamonds. It did not feel real. Later that afternoon, Adrian joined her in the foyer, already dressed in a dark tailored suit. The charity gala is tonight, he said without looking up from his phone. It will be our first public appearance as a couple. The press will be there, and so will my competitors. You will stay by my side and speak only when necessary. I am not a doll, Mr. Hale, she said quietly. He paused, glancing up. No, you are not. But tonight you must play a part. The black Bentley carried them into the heart of downtown, where a grand hotel glittered under chandeliers. As the cameras flashed, Adrian's hand found hers not tenderly, but as a calculated move. Still, his grip steadied her trembling fingers. When they stepped onto the red carpet, reporters shouted questions. Mr. Hale, is this a merger between business and love? Mrs. Hale, how did you meet your husband? Lena smiled faintly, repeating the line they had rehearsed. We met through work. It just happened. Inside, the ballroom glowed with gold light and chatter. Adrian navigated the crowd with perfect control, greeting investors and politicians. Lena followed his lead, smiling when introduced, nodding when she did not understand the corporate talk swirling around them. But as the evening wore on, she began to notice the fatigue behind his sharp smile, the tension in his shoulders. At one point, a senior shareholder approached, voice dripping with sarcasm. So this is the new Mrs. Hale. I must admit, Adrian, she seems rather unexpected. Lena felt the sting, but before she could speak, Adrian turned sharply. She is exactly what I needed, he said, his tone low but firm. Someone honest. The man laughed awkwardly and walked away. Adrian leaned closer, his voice soft enough for only her to hear. Do not take it personally. They doubt everything that does not come with a price tag. She looked at him, surprised by the faint trace of protectiveness in his words. And what about you? Do you doubt me too? His eyes met hers. I doubt everyone, Mrs. Hale. It keeps me alive. The orchestra began to play, and he offered his hand. Dance with me, they expected. In place today our act to the Samalon, in place our acts as the one of the calm, Lena hesitated, then placed her hand in his. As they moved across the floor, her nerves softened, the rhythm carrying her closer to him. The lights dimmed, and for a brief moment, she caught a glimpse of something rare in his face. Quiet, human, almost gentle. When the song ended, applause filled the hall. Adrian leaned in, his voice low. You did well. Better than expected. She smiled faintly. You almost sound surprised. I am, he admitted, but in a good way. The ride home was silent, but the air between them had shifted less business, more something undefined. Back at Hale Manor, Lena slipped off her heels and carried them through the marble hallway. As she passed the study, she saw Adrian inside, standing by the window, jacket draped over one arm, tie loosened. He looked exhausted, not from work, but from something deeper. For a moment, she thought about saying goodnight, about thanking him for standing up for her earlier, but then she stopped. He would only brush it off, turn it into another business gesture. Instead, she whispered to herself, maybe this contract is not as simple as he thinks. Upstairs, she closed her door, unaware that Adrian had looked up at that exact moment, watching her reflection disappear from the glass, his expression unreadable, his heart caught between control and something dangerously close to longing. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of their arrangement began to take shape. Every morning, Lena Hale joined Adrian for breakfast in the sunlit dining room, where everything was measured: his words, his tone, even the way he stirred his coffee. There was no laughter, no small talk, only schedules and business. Yet every so often, she caught glimpses of the man beneath the armor. One morning, when a news anchor mentioned Skyver Group's rising stock, Lena smiled. It looks like your plan is working, she said, reaching for her tea. Adrian barely looked up. Plans always work when people do their part. It sounded cold, but the corner of his mouth twitched almost like a hidden smile. Later that day, she followed Clara, the stylist, through another round of etiquette lessons. Balancing crystal glasses, greeting board members, smiling without showing too much emotion, it felt absurd. But each time she faltered, Adrian's voice echoed in her head. They doubt everything that does not come with a price tag. That evening, the two of them attended a press dinner. The cameras clicked as they stepped out of the car, his hands steady on her back. Inside, the room glittered with chandeliers and half-sincere smiles. One reporter asked about their marriage, and Adrian, without missing a beat, said, "She keeps me grounded." It was just a line, a clever answer. Yet something in his voice made her heart tighten. When they returned home, Lena found herself unable to sleep. She walked barefoot through the quiet hallways, stopping at the open door of the study. Adrian was there, still in his shirt sleeves, staring at a framed photograph on his desk. a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. She hesitated. She was someone important, wasn't she? He looked up, startled, then sighed. My mother. She died before I built any of this. His gaze shifted to the window, where the city lights shimmered. She wanted me to live a life that mattered, not just one that succeeded. I am still trying to figure out the difference. Lena leaned against the doorframe. Maybe it is not about success. Maybe it is about who stays when everything else fails. Their eyes met in the half-light. Neither spoke. The air between them changed, softened. The following weekend, Hale Manor hosted a charity luncheon for Skyver's investors. Lena helped the staff arrange flowers and prepare the guest list. She moved quickly, sleeves rolled up, not caring about appearances. When Adrian entered the room, several employees froze, afraid of his reputation, but he stopped, watching as Lena tied a ribbon on one of the centerpieces. Why are you doing their work? He asked. Because it is still our event, she said simply. And no one likes a boss who only gives orders. It is lafted dot. For a second, he looked as though he wanted to argue. Then he smiled, small but real. You sound like her, he murmured. Your mother? He nodded once. The event began smoothly until an investor made a sharp remark about the company's publicity stunt of a marriage. The room went silent. Lena felt her pulse quicken. But before she could respond, Adrian placed a hand on her shoulder. Let me handle this, he said, then turned to the man. You may question my strategies, he said coolly, but not my wife's dignity. The man backed off, muttering an apology. Lena's eyes widened. For the first time, Adrian had called her his wife, without irony, without distance. After the guests left, Lena found him on the terrace overlooking the city. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of rain and magnolia. You did not have to defend me, she said softly. Yes, I did, he replied. You were right. It is not about success. It is about who stays. For a long moment they stood in silence, the city glittering below like 1,000 tiny secrets. Then, Adrian exhaled slowly. You should get some rest, Mrs. Hale. She turned to leave but paused at the door. Good night, Adrian. He looked at her for a moment before answering, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. Good night, Lena. This shot you all whited all did. And for the first time, her name on his lips did not sound like part of a contract. It sounded like a promise he had not meant to make. The next week brought another storm this time. Not from the sky, but from within the empire itself. Skyver Group was preparing for its annual gala, a high-profile event that gathered investors, media, and board members from around the world. For Lena Hale, it would be her biggest test yet as the so-called contract wife of a billionaire. The morning before the event, she found Adrian standing in the courtyard, reviewing reports on his tablet. He looked calm, but his eyes betrayed exhaustion. Are you ready for tonight? He asked without looking up. I think so, she replied, adjusting the sleeve of her gown that had just been delivered. Though it feels strange being dressed up for a room full of people who think this marriage is a performance. Adrian finally glanced at her. Then let us give them the best performance they have ever seen. His words were sharp, but beneath them was something else, a flicker of trust, of shared purpose. That evening, Hale Manor transformed into a world of light and glass. Guests arrived in waves, cameras flashing, laughter mingling with the sound of the string quartet. Lena stood beside Adrian at the grand staircase, her arm resting lightly on his. Every movement, every glance had been rehearsed. Yet when their eyes met under the chandelier, she felt something real, something that was not part of any script. The speeches began, and Adrian took the stage to address the audience. His voice was confident, controlled, commanding the room with effortless authority. But halfway through, a reporter raised a hand. Mr. Hale, the reporter said, rumor has it your recent marriage was arranged to stabilize investor confidence. Care to comment? The crowd shifted uneasily. Lena's pulse quickened. Adrian smiled faintly, the kind of smile that could disarm a room. Rumors exist because people enjoy stories, he said, but this story is about partnership, not profit. He extended his hand toward her. Mrs. Hale, would you join me? Gasps rippled through the hall as Lena stepped forward. He took her hand, his voice steady. She stood by me when the company was crumbling, not because of money or fame, but because she believed in doing the right thing. That is the kind of foundation I want Skyver Group to represent. The applause came slowly at first, then built into thunder. Cameras flashed wildly. Adrian led her into a slow dance as the orchestra began to play, and for a brief, dazzling moment, it felt as if the entire world had vanished, only their steps. Their heartbeat and the warmth of his hand on her back remained. When the music ended, he leaned close, whispering, "You just saved the company's reputation." Lena smiled softly. "Then I guess our partnership works." Later that night, after the guests had left and the chandeliers dimmed, Lena slipped out onto the balcony for air. The city stretched below in glittering silence. She did not hear Adrian approach until his voice broke the stillness. "You handled yourself with grace tonight," he said quietly. "Thank you." She turned to face him. "You defended me. I should be the one thanking you." He leaned on the railing beside her, eyes on the skyline. "For years I thought people only stayed when they had something to gain. But you make me question that." Her breath caught. Maybe that is not such a bad thing to question. He looked at her then, really looked past the contract, past the conditions, past the pretense. The distance between them felt smaller than ever. Lightning flickered on the horizon, and for a heartbeat she thought he might kiss her. But he stepped back, his composure snapping into place. "Good night, Mrs. Hale," he said softly, retreating toward the hall. She stood there long after he was gone, hand resting on the cold iron railing, her heart pounding in confusion. Somewhere deep down, she knew the line between business and love had already been crossed and there was no going back. The next morning, the world outside Hale Manor sparkled after a night of rain. Inside, however, silence filled every corner. Lena Hale woke earlier than usual, her thoughts still tangled from the gala. The look in Adrian's eyes, the way his hand lingered at her waist a second too long, the warmth that felt almost real. When she came downstairs, she found him already in the breakfast room, reading the financial pages with that same unreadable expression. The air between them was heavy, as if neither wanted to mention what had happened. "Morning," she said quietly. He nodded without looking up. "You have an appointment with the Foundation's public relations team at 10. They will brief you on the next charity campaign." She hesitated. "Do you ever stop working?" He turned a page, unmoved. "Work is simpler than people, Mrs. Hale." Her lips curved in a faint smile. "Then I must be very complicated for you." That made him glance up for the first time. The ghost of a smile flickered across his face. "More than you know." Later that day, Lena accompanied him to the company's headquarters. She watched from the corner of the glass-walled conference room as Adrian led a presentation to his board. His voice was sharp, confident, but she could see the strain in his shoulders, the fatigue he tried so hard to hide. When the meeting ended, he lingered by the window, staring at the city below. "You should take a break," she said gently. "You look exhausted." He gave a low laugh. "If I stop, everything falls apart." "Maybe not everything," she said. "Maybe you are allowed to be human once in a while." He turned to her then, his guard dropping just a little. "And what about you? Have you stopped pretending yet?" Her breath caught. "Pretending what?" "That this marriage means nothing to you." The words hit harder than she expected. She looked away, unsure what to say. For a moment they simply stood there, two people trapped in a contract that was starting to feel dangerously real. That evening, Adrian suggested they have dinner together in the garden, a rare change from their usual formality. The sun had dipped low, painting the sky with soft orange light. The scent of jasmine drifted through the air as Lena set down her glass. "I never thanked you," Adrian said quietly, "for standing by me these past weeks. You did not have to." "I signed a contract," she replied softly. "It is part of the deal." He shook his head. "No. You have done more than what the contract required. You could have left, but you stayed." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Because I wanted to." Something shifted in his eyes, tension, longing, disbelief. For the first time since their marriage, he reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. "You make it hard to keep my promises, Lena." "What promise?" "The one that said I would not fall in love with you." Her heart stopped. The world seemed to narrow to the space between them, the faint hum of the fountain, the rhythm of their breaths. But before she could answer, a voice called from the terrace, Adrian's assistant, holding a phone. "Sir, urgent call from the board." He withdrew his hand, the moment breaking apart. "Duty calls," he said quietly, his mask sliding back into place. She watched him walk away, her heart aching with a mix of anger and longing. When she finally went back inside, the room felt too large, too quiet, too cold. Upstairs in his office, Adrian stared at the city lights and replayed that single line in his mind. Because I wanted to. It terrified him. How much he wanted to believe it. For the first time, the man who had built an empire on logic and control realized he was losing both to a woman who was never supposed to mean anything more than a name on a contract. The calm between Adrian Hale and Lena did not last. Only a few days after their quiet dinner, the world around them began to tremble again, this time from betrayal. It started with a headline. Early that morning, Lena's phone buzzed endlessly on the nightstand. She blinked awake, reached for it, and froze at the words flashing across the screen. Leaked contract exposes billionaire's fake marriage, Skyver's CEO under fire for deception. Her blood ran cold. Dozens of messages filled her inbox. Reporters, colleagues, even strangers demanding answers. By the time she ran downstairs, Adrian was already in his study. The newspaper spread open on his desk. His face was pale with fury. "Who did this?" she asked, her voice trembling. He looked up, eyes dark and sharp. "Someone with access to my legal department. The documents were real, our signatures, the terms. Everything." Lena's heart pounded. "Then it is over, isn't it? The truth is out. Why ever dating was alapita dalami? Is this C.S. Tefton? In mating Colland?" Adrian slammed the paper shut. "Not if I can control the narrative. Damage control starts now." But control was slipping faster than he could grasp it. Within hours, television screens across the city replayed the story. News anchors speculated that Skyver Group's marriage was a publicity stunt. Stock prices plummeted. Protesters gathered outside headquarters with signs reading, "Love is not a business deal." By noon, the board called an emergency meeting. Adrian's assistant handed him a folder. "They want your resignation, sir. Unless you issue a public apology." Adrian's jaw clenched. "They can try to bury me, but I built this company. I will not hand it over to men who only know greed." In is mass any wondered about that be self of the ram. Lena stood at the doorway, her hands shaking. "Adrian, maybe you should step back for now. It might protect you." He turned on her, his anger barely contained. "You think I should give up? Do you have any idea what is at stake?" "I am trying to help," she said, her voice breaking. "But if you keep fighting everyone, you will lose everything, including me." The room fell silent. For a moment, the fury in his eyes flickered into something softer hurt. "You think I care about this scandal because of money? I care because they used you to destroy me." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed again. The caller ID read Vanessa Lang, his ex-girlfriend, and Skyver's former PR director. He hesitated, then answered. "What do you want?" Her voice, smooth and venomous, echoed through the speaker. "I told you the world would know, Adrian. You thought you could erase me, but I was the one who gave that contract to the press. Consider it justice." Lena's face went pale. "It was her?" Adrian ended the call without another word, then ran a hand through his hair. "She had copies of everything from the merger. I should have destroyed them." That night, the mansion was silent except for the sound of rain. Lena packed her things in the guest room, her heart heavy. She had not been part of his world long, but she understood what came next. Scandal, investigations, humiliation. When Adrian appeared at the door, she could barely meet his eyes. "I cannot stay here," she whispered. "The world thinks I sold myself. My mother sees those headlines. Do you know what that feels like?" He stepped closer. "Leaving will not fix this, Lena." "Maybe not," she said softly, "but staying will destroy us both." She brushed past him, her suitcase bumping the doorframe. He wanted to stop her, to say something, anything, but no words came. Hours later, Adrian stood alone in the rain outside Hale Manor, the echo of her footsteps still in his mind. He looked down at his hand, where his wedding ring gleamed faintly under the storm's light, and whispered the truth he had been running from. "It was never supposed to be real," he said, voice breaking. But somehow, it was. And as thunder rolled across the sky, he realized the empire he had built was nothing compared to the one thing he had just lost. The following days were chaos. The scandal had spread far beyond the city, and Skyver Group was bleeding trust faster than any crisis manager could repair. Reporters camped outside Hale Manor, shouting questions through the gates. Every headline screamed betrayal, greed, or hypocrisy. And in the middle of it all, Adrian Hale faced the fight of his life alone. Inside the marble boardroom, the atmosphere was tense and sharp as glass. Members of the board sat around the long table, faces tight with judgment. The chairman cleared his throat. Mr. Hale, Skyver's reputation is in ruins. The investors demand accountability. We are asking for your resignation effective immediately. Adrian remained still, hands folded, his gaze unwavering. So that is what this is really about, he said coldly. You have wanted me gone for years. One of the directors, a man with gray hair and a cruel smirk, replied, You built this empire on arrogance and lies. Now you are paying for it. Adrian rose from his chair. Maybe I was arrogant, but I built this company from nothing, and I did it with integrity. You think a leaked contract defines me? It does not. The room buzzed with murmurs, but before he could say more, the doors opened and Lena Hale stepped inside. She was pale, her eyes rimmed with sleeplessness, but her voice was steady. That contract defined me too, she said, walking toward the front. So if you are going to blame someone, you should blame me as well. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Adrian froze. Lena, what are you doing here? She met his eyes. What I should have done from the start, telling the truth. She turned to the board. Yes, the marriage began as a contract. I signed it because I needed help and because he needed a solution. But what I did not expect was to see how much he cared about this company, about his people. He did not manipulate anyone. He protected them. He protected me. The chairman frowned. Mrs. Hale, this is highly irregular. No, Lena interrupted, her voice rising. What is irregular is that you are punishing a man for saving what all of you were willing to destroy for profit. Her words silenced the room. Cameras from the press outside had already begun streaming the meeting through the glass windows. Adrian looked at her, astonished. Lena, he said softly, you do not have to do this. Yes, I do, she replied, her voice trembling but sure. Because somewhere between all those signatures and fake smiles, I forgot that this marriage was supposed to be temporary. But I cannot stand here and pretend that it still is. A ripple of whispers filled the room. The board members exchanged glances, uncertain how to react. Adrian stepped forward, his voice steady. I am willing to resign, he said, but not because of guilt, because I will not let her take the fall for what I started. Lena shook her head quickly. No, we do this together. At that moment, the chairman sighed. Enough. The press already has their story. What matters now is how Skyver moves forward. Adrian looked around the room, his tone firm. Then let this be the first honest thing we have done in years. End the lies. End the games. I will leave the company in new hands, but I will not let this woman be humiliated for standing beside me. The board fell silent. Even the chairman seemed moved by the conviction in his voice. Finally, he nodded slowly. Very well, Mr. Hale. You have made your point. Adrian turned to Lena, relief and sorrow mingling in his eyes. You just saved my soul, you know that? She smiled faintly through tears. You once said I saved your empire. Maybe I just finished the job. As they walked out together, the press swarmed the entrance, shouting questions. Adrian reached for her hand, not as a performance this time, but as something real. The cameras flashed, capturing the moment the billionaire, who once believed only in business, chose honesty and love instead. And in that storm of flashing lights and shouted words, Adrian Hale finally understood. His empire could crumble, his name could fade, but what he held in his hand was the only truth worth keeping. Weeks passed, and the noise finally began to fade. The headlines moved on to new scandals, and the chaos that had once surrounded Skyver Group settled into quiet recovery. Adrian Hale had stepped down from the company, as promised, leaving behind an empire he had built with his own hands. The board appointed a new interim CEO, but the truth was clear. Skyver would always bear his mark. Lena often visited the community foundation that she and Adrian had created together, one that helped small businesses survive financial collapse. She found comfort there, among people who still believed in second chances. It reminded her of who she was before the mansion, before the fame, before the contract. One afternoon, she was reviewing project proposals when a familiar voice spoke from behind her. You never could take a day off, could you? Her heart leapt. She turned to see Adrian standing by the doorway, dressed simply in a gray shirt and jeans, the hard edge of the CEO replaced by something softer, something real. Adrian, she breathed, half smiling. I thought you were in New York meeting with investors. I was, he said, stepping closer. But I realized I was chasing the wrong kind of deal. She folded her arms, trying to hide the way her pulse quickened. And what deal would that be? The one that actually matters, he said gently. You. Lena looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. You do not owe me anything. You already gave up everything for me. Adrian shook his head. I did not give up. I finally learned what my mother meant when she said a life that matters is one built on truth, not titles. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and familiar, the wedding ring he had stopped wearing after the scandal. The contract was fake, Lena, but what I felt for you was not. I do not want to rebuild my empire. I want to build something real with you. Tears welled in her eyes. You cannot just walk back into my life and expect me to say yes. He smiled faintly. Then let me ask properly this time. He went down on one knee, right there in the middle of the foundation's modest office, surrounded by stacks of papers and sunlight pouring through the window. The gesture was simple, but the sincerity in his voice was overwhelming. Lena Brooks Hale, he said, his tone steady. Will you marry me not because we need to, not because anyone expects us to, but because this time, it is real? Her hand flew to her mouth. For a long moment she could not speak. Then she laughed through her tears and whispered, Yes, 1,000 times yes. Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger, and the world seemed to still. The tension, the contracts, the lies, all of it, dissolved into a peace neither of them had known before. Months later, on a quiet afternoon by the coast, they stood hand in hand before a small group of friends and employees who had become family. The ceremony was simple, no cameras, no headlines, just vows spoken from the heart. As the sun dipped low, Adrian brushed a strand of hair from her face and said softly, No contracts this time. Lena smiled, eyes bright with tears. Just love. The waves crashed gently in the distance, and the two of them kissed as the world turned golden around them. And for the first time, Adrian Hale, the man who once believed success was everything, finally understood that true leadership and true love were never written in ink. They were proven through action, through kindness, and through the courage to start again. Their empire was no longer made of glass and money. It was built of something far stronger, two hearts that had learned the cost of pride and the value of forgiveness. And this time, there were no contracts to sign, only a promise to keep forever.